Welcome to Elizabeth Reads. Have you read Jemima Small with me so far? Right now we're on chapter 22. It's called 1,000 Thoughts. The next morning, Mrs. Savage was standing at the front of the assembly hall with her finger over her lips, waiting for complete silence. I was sitting in the middle of a row with my feet on tiptoes and my thighs pressed together so my legs didn't squash into Miki or Aaron too much. I knew Miki wouldn't care, and Aaron had never said anything bad to me. I guess it had just become a habit. Trying to take up less space. "Good morning, lower school," Mrs. Savage's voice echoed around the hall. "I have a very special announcement this morning. It's the news you have all been waiting for. Has anyone from Clifton Academy qualified for the next stage of the Brainiacs competition?" A murmur went round the hall, and Miki squeezed my arm. "You got this." My heart was beating so fast, it felt like it was about to explode through my chest, which in assembly would be totally embarrassing. "Places at the Brainiac Selection Day are reserved for people who scored the very highest percentage on the qualifying tests." A smile stretched across Mrs. Savage's face. "So, without further ado, I am very excited to announce that 3 of our Clifton Academy students are on the list." Everyone broke into applause, and Mrs. Savage had to wait for ages for it to go quiet again. I took deep breaths and rubbed my sweating palms on my skirt. "Our 3 students will join over 200 others from all over the country to take part in a special day of mental challenges in London in just 4 weeks' time. Only 1 student from each school can get through to the show, so not only will our 3 students be competing against other schools, they will also be competing against each other. We shall, of course, be rooting for all of them. So, who are they?" The hall buzzed with excitement. Miki squeezed my arm even harder. My heart pounded against my ribs. I wanted to hear my name, but my cheeks were already burning at the thought of standing up in front of everybody. "If I call your name, come to the front so we can give you a special Clifton Academy cheer." Mrs. Savage waved at the IT person. "We'll need a photograph for the school website." My palms were still sweaty, even though I'd wiped them loads of times. If Mrs. Savage called my name, I knew someone would whisper big. I knew I'd see people's eyes going from my head down to my feet, like when I collected my certificates and prizes at the end of last year, as though they were judging every kilogram. They say you can never know people's thoughts, but you can. You just look at their faces and you can hear them. 1,000 voices all saying the same thing. Jemima big. Jemima Small. People started clapping and everything seemed to slow down, like I'd fallen into a space-time vortex. My stomach dropped, my head was spinning, and Miki had to practically push me out of my seat. I carefully made my way to the end of the narrow row, trying my best not to tread on people's feet or bump into their legs, which was impossible. I could feel my cheeks burning bright red and my heart thundered with fear. My hands were shaking, but somewhere deep down there was the tiniest fizz of excitement. But a few minutes later, as I stood on stage next to the other 2 people who had qualified, I didn't feel happy or excited or proud like Mrs. Savage was saying I should. I barely listened to her talking about the extra studying we'd be doing after school or telling me to stand up straight for the photograph. I didn't even care what people in the audience were thinking, because standing right next to me, grinning like she'd just won the Nobel Prize, was Lottie Ratface Freeman. When I got home, Dad was waxing a surfboard on the kitchen table. "Hey," I said, and he practically jumped out of his skin. "Jemima, I didn't hear you come in. Is it that time already?" "What are you doing?" "I thought I might go for a surf on the weekend," he said. "Haven't been in years. What with our health kick and considering the weather's still pretty mild, I thought we could go to Dolphin Bay. See if I've still got the moves." He bent his knees and pretended to do what I assumed was supposed to be surfing. "Where's Jasper?" "He got a different bus, said he needed something for his magic show from that hocus pocus shop on the pier. He said he'd messaged you. Is surfing a good idea at your age?" Dad stopped waxing, picked up his phone, then looked at me. "What do you mean at my age? I'm only 46. It's hardly ancient." "Oh my, Dad, 46? You're practically geriatric. It's probably why you're in a stress all the time." "Jemima, I am not geriatric. Your Nana's geriatric. And I'm not in a stress all the time either, thank you very much," which is a miracle considering. He leaned the surfboard against the wall, washed his hands, then took a watermelon that was the size of a beach ball out of the fridge. "Gina suggested trying some different fruit and veg this week, so..." "Gina? You spoke to her again?" I put the cloth back on the table and placed the newly filled fruit bowl in the center. Dad's cheeks turned pink. I just wanted some advice, you know. I stared at him. You phoned her? She said to phone if I had any questions. Dad smiled awkwardly. I just want to get this right. Okay, well, first of all, stop phoning my teachers. He handed me a plate with 2 tiny slices of watermelon on it. And second, don't starve me to death. Ha, right. No, of course. Sorry. Here. He sliced another tiny piece of watermelon and handed it to me. Thanks, I said, sitting down. Watermelon is 92% water, you know. Who's starving to death? Jasper appeared through the bead curtain. His uniform still looked as immaculate as it had this morning. He must secretly iron his clothes at school or something. Dad's trying to starve me to death, I said, pointing to my plate. Jemima, that's the last thing I'm trying to do, Dad said, handing Jasper a plate with 2 tiny slices of watermelon on it. Maybe watermelon was just really expensive. It'll take a long time, Jasper whispered, and then whistled as he spotted the surfboard. Hey, you got your board out. Dad, did you hear that? Jasper just called me fat. I didn't. Dad sighed. Jasper, we've had this conversation so many times. Leave your sister alone. She's at a sensitive age. You're at a sensitive age, I mumbled. Dad gave me a tight-lipped smile, like he was covering up how much of a stress he was in because he'd only just claimed he never got in a stress. Yeah, I thought we could go to the beach at the weekend. He lowered his voice. Just go easy on your sister, okay? Sure, Dad, Jasper said in full suck-up mode. He sat down opposite me, reached his hand out to mine and patted it. I'm sorry, sister. Good, Dad said. Now, can we all just sit nicely and eat this watermelon together like a normal family? I got 100% in my French test today, Dad, Jasper said, raising his eyebrows at me. Mr. Picard thinks I could take my GCSE at the end of this year if I want. Wow, Jasper, very good. Or should I say très bien? Jasper laughed really loudly and for ages. I waited for him to blurt out about me qualifying for Brainiacs and make a sarcastic remark, but he carried on talking about his major French achievements as though passing a test on conjugated verbs made him Napoleon or something. Then I realized Mrs. Savage must have only made the announcement about Brainiacs in lower school assembly. Jasper had no idea I'd qualified. When he'd finally finished talking, I said, Well done, brother. That is a remarkable achievement, and reached across the table and patted his hand. By the way, I just got through to the selection day of the popular TV show Brainiacs. Dad almost choked on his watermelon. Jemima, that's fantastic. He jumped up, gave me a massive hug, then shouted to Luna to come inside. He grabbed his iPad and moved his chair right next to mine as he looked up the Brainiacs website to see what the selection day would be like. He booked train tickets for us, saying how brilliantly I'd done and how I didn't have to do any chores while I revised for it, and said how proud he was exactly 16 times. Jasper stared at me over his plate of half-eaten watermelon, like he was suddenly figuring out he wasn't the smartest person in our family, even though I'd been telling him that for ages. All right, if you want to hear chapter 23, why don't you subscribe and then you'll know when it comes out. Bye-bye.